I entered the Hong Kong Premier Ball League, the final VGC tournament in Regulation H. Reg H has been one of, if not the best format in Scarlet and Violet. It's a format that doesn't allow any restricted Pokemon, Paradox Pokemon, or Treasures of Ruin, and thanks to the low power curve, many unique teams and strategies were able to gain success in top tournaments throughout the format. With Regulation G returning as the official format in January, the Hong Kong Premier Ball League hosted on December 29th would be Regulation H's last hurrah, while also serving as the first tournament in the Hong Kong circuit. But before talking about that, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Hi, my name is Tugi. I like playing games differently, I have a severe case of procrastination, and most importantly, this will be my first season competing in the official VGC. This will be my first season competing in competitive VGC, and the Hong Kong Premier Ball League will be my first official tournament. Having played Pokemon for almost the entirety of my life, I'm not completely oblivious to competitive Pokemon. In fact, I've always kept a keen eye on the scene. I had a little bit of a hustle in black and white single battles back when Pokemon Online was still a thing, and I've been picking up through various content creators, so I'm aware of the guerrilla tactics running around in the competitive scene. Okay, I'll stop with the puns, they're all a pretty long reach. Scarlet and Violet was the generation where I started actively paying attention to VGC, and after lurking around for a year or two, I signed up for a local tournament called the Dragon Cup, and generally found competing to be quite rewarding. Fast forward a few months and the 2025 season was about to start, and I told myself that this was going to be the year. However, since I live in Hong Kong, where VGC events are directly managed by the Pokemon Company, there's a completely different tournament structure. Instead of attending multiple level events across the season to gain CP, Worlds invites in the APAC regions, excluding Japan and Korea, are directly decided by two tournaments across the season, the Premier Ball League and the Master Ball League. The Premier Ball League is a regional level event, where the top 4 players automatically qualify for the Master Ball League, while the Master Ball League is the national level event, and top players in this event qualify for the 2025 Anaheim World Championships. But if all world spots are decided by the Master Ball League, does that mean that the Premier Ball League is just a throwaway event where you use meme teams to just hack your opponent? Well, not quite. The top 4 players in this event gain bye rounds in the Master Ball League, giving you a huge advantage if you want to qualify for Worlds. And oh, in case you were wondering, no, we don't have any cash prizes, but you do get a nice A4 folder for participating, and the winner does get a pretty cool evolution plaque, so the stakes are still pretty high. The Premier Ball League will be a 2-day event, but unlike other tournaments, all Swiss rounds will be played in an open team sheet best of 1 format. This is a much more chaotic format, since in a best of 3 set, you can play things a little risky and scout information, but that isn't the case for best of 1s. A lot of things like damage calcs and speed tiers are a complete guessing game. But since best of 3s will be played on day 2, I needed to build a team that was good in both formats. And because of open team sheet, I couldn't bring a gimmicky anti-meta team either. I needed to submit my team 2 weeks before the actual tournament, and because I love to procrastinate, in the end I only had 5 days to come up with a team. But none of my test teams are working. I experimented with Psy-Spam and Archaludon and Hisuian Zoroark, but none of the pieces really clicked together that well. With just 3 days left and 0 inspiration, I decided to just stick with a core that I used throughout Regulation H, Archaludon Rain. Specifically, the team that Federico Campanesi used to win the Gdansk Regionals. I mean sure, this team was featured everywhere since it won a regional and had clear counters to it, but it was a team I was comfortable with, and knew it had a really high power ceiling if I used it correctly. So after messing around a little bit, this is my team. Starting with Archaludon, the star of the team. With stamina and assault vest, its role is to act as a stalwart on the field to tank hits, and sweep the opponent with its boosted stats. Electroshot and powered up body press makes it one of the hardest hitters in the format, and Draco Meteor gets potential 1-hit KOs on dragon types before any boosts. This Archaludon spread sacrifices some of its special attack EVs in exchange for more speed EVs to outspeed other stamina Archaludons, and uses a bold nature to make its defense even higher after a few stamina boosts, making body press even more lethal. I rounded it off with Terra Bug instead of Terra Fairy because I saw that dragon usage was on the drop, and Terra Bug gave me a better matchup into Sneasler and Goldengo, as well as mirror matchups against other Archaludons. To support Archaludon, I paired it up with Rillaboom, which complements it in more ways than one. It has Fake Out Pressure, grassy terrain gives healing to Archaludon every turn, but most importantly, Rillaboom is running Bullet Seed and holding the loaded dice item. Bullet Seed is surprisingly good in the metagame, since many Pokemon run Focus Sash, and Bullet Seed completely bypasses that, giving me a crucial check against some important Pokemon. The main reason it's used, however, is to enable Archaludon's stamina. Rillaboom is trained to be 1 speed point faster than Archaludon, and by targeting its partner with Bullet Seed, I can give Archaludon at least 4 defense boosts in one turn, and immediately hit my opponent with a +4 body press. These two are a dynamic pairing, and as long as I can get Archaludon set up, my opponent's physical Pokemon can't really do anything against it. I rounded out Rillaboom with Grassy Glide and High Horsepower. Terrafire ensures it can survive Dire Claw or Eruption to set up Archaludon. In every Rain team, Pelipper is pretty much a given slot on the team. With nearly full investment in special attack and speed, it threatens pretty much everything with Weather Ball and Hurricane in Rain. I added Protect and then opted for Wide Guard since I plan on having another Tailwind setter in the team. Wide Guard also gives me a better matchup into Psy Spam and Eruption, and I force my opponent to predict if I've clicked the move or not, adding that little bit of randomness in a BO1 game. Terra Ghost blocks Fake Out, while Focus Sash improves its survivability and potentially makes it an in-game sweeper. As for my actual sweeper, I had to go for the big fish. Swift Swim doubles Basculegion's speed in Rain, and when equipped with the Choice Band, Wave Crash does at least half to almost everything on the field. Flip Turn gives it mobility, Aqua Jet gives it priority, and Last Respects gives it the ability to finish things off in the endgame. I gave Basculegion max speed and nearly max attack EVs, and chose a defensive Terra type in Grass to protect it from spores and redirection. These 4 Pokemon formed the core for my Archaludon Rain team, but since this was a BO1 tournament, I wanted some curveball choices to catch people off guard, while also covering some potential weaknesses of the team. Enter Salamence. It had Intimidate and was the Tailwind setter of the team. Salamence actually got some decent results in the early stages of Regulation H, using a special set in many Archaludon teams. My Salamence, however, was physical, and made use of another flying move, Dual Wing Beat, a 40 base power move that hits twice. It hits less hard than Hurricane, but I liked it for several reasons. Dual Wing Beat has better accuracy than Hurricane outside of Rain, and with the help of Terra Flying, it can actually do some decent damage. It knocks out Focus Sash Sneasler in a single hit, and because it's a physical move, it can get surprise knockouts into Volcarona. I also had a tech where I could use Dual Wing Beat into Archaludon, giving 2 stamina boosts if I really needed it. I added Rain Dance from Manual Rain to counter the emerging Jumpluff Sun teams, as it's slower than Jumpluff and can also threaten it back with Dual Wing Beat. I ended up fighting 0 Sun teams. Protect was my final move, and I gave it Safety Goggles to counter Sleep Powder and Spores. I put enough attack EVs to one-shot Volcarona after Terra Flying. I ended up fighting 0 Volcaronas. Enough speed EVs to outspeed max speed Volcarona and modest Charizard, and enough bulk to survive Dragonite's Scale Shot and Goldengo's Choice Specs Make It Rain. For my final member, I wanted some other form of speed control other than Tailwind, as well as something to counter Porygon 2. I went with Grimmsnarl. It had Prankster Taunt to shut down P2 and Electabuzz, as well as Thunder Wave to slow things down. Light Screen gives even more special bulk to Archaludon, while Spirit Break threatens Dragon types. I invested almost fully in bulk, but gave 4 attack EVs and Adamant Nature for slightly more damage, and finished with Terra Ghost to counter fakeouts. And with that, the team was complete, and although there were some things I maybe would have changed, I was overall happy with it. I submitted my team, and all that's left to do is to practice, come up with game plans, and get ready for the big day. Day 1 of the competition, and the event was held in a huge convention hall at the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center, with over 2,000 players competing in the Premier Ball League. Oh, I was just talking about the TCG players. VGC was just a small corner in the hall. The rules for Day 1 were announced. 6 BO1 Swiss rounds with a hard timer limit of 20 minutes. After the time is up, a tiebreaker will decide the winner if the battle isn't finished. This didn't really become an issue for me, but we'll get back to that later. Sorry for interrupting here, post-edit Tugi here. Most of the battles here are a recreation of what happened during the games. I didn't take notes for the video during the games, so I might have forgotten my opponent's sets or missed some details here and there. but for the most part, most scenarios should be approximately what happened. Anyways, I would really appreciate it if you can like and subscribe, and share this video with other viewers if you want. It's completely optional, so it's up to you, no pressure. But without further ado, enjoy the battles. Traditionally, round 1 of a tournament is essentially the Wild West, with all sorts of off-standard teams, and my opponent was no exception. They were running a sand team centered around Tyranitar and Excadrill, and also had a size spam mode with Delphox and Indeedee. They led with Primarina and Sneasler, while I led with Rillaboom and Pelipper. But despite having the right leads, the pressure gets to me, and I immediately make a blunder. I was caught in two minds here. I wanted to switch in either Salamence or Archaludon. Salamence would intimidate Sneasler, but I can also set up Archaludon if my opponent doesn't respect my switch. I ended up switching to Salamence, but I realized I messed up. Instead of using Fake Out, I side bullet seeded with Rillaboom. And because this is a Pokemon Showdown, I forgot that I couldn't cancel my move. Salamence lowers Sneasler's attack, but my opponent doubles into that slot, using Close Combat and Moonblast to knock it out, as Rillaboom just does nothing. Despite a disaster of a turn 1, this wasn't all that bad, as I was able to get Archaludon on the field safely and get my strategy going. I predicted Primarina to switch, and after Dire Claw goes into Rillaboom, I Terra Archaludon and get it to +5 with Bullet Seed. Body Press knocks out the incoming Tyranitar, and with their Weather Setter gone, I'm able to switch Rillaboom into Pelipper the next turn to reset Rain. My opponent doubles into the Pelipper with Rock Slide and Dire Claw, but thanks to the extra HP EVs, Pelipper lives on 1 HP, and Archaludon body presses Sneasler. I use Wide Guard the next turn, but my opponent makes a good read, protecting Excadrill from Archaludon and using Dire Claw to knock out Pelipper. Rillaboom comes back in, and my opponent targets Archaludon, hoping for a flinch or sleep, but to no avail. Excadrill goes down to a double up, and Primarina comes in as Grassy Terrain ends. We both trade our starters, but Sneasler can't do anything to a +6 defense Terror Bug Archaludon, allowing me to take the game and go 1-0 with a narrow victory. For the first game of the day, it wasn't clean, and I almost threw the game away on turn 1 if I switched in Archaludon. I still scraped past in the end, but I definitely needed to control my nerves if I wanted to win against the higher ranked players. Round 2 pairings were up, and after a shaky game 1, I was low in confidence. So imagine how nervous I was when I got called over to the main stage, because my next match was going to be on stream. To make things worse, my opponent was a former Hong Kong regional champion with multiple world appearances. I calmed myself down with some water before looking at the team sheet, and wait, this is Wolfie's starter team. I knew about this because I watched him play with it live at 4 AM in the morning, and with 3 fire types on the team, I think my team had a pretty good matchup. I led with Basculegion and Pelipper, while my opponent leads with Primarina and Blaziken. Blaziken needs to protect to get speed boosts, so I double into Primarina with Wave Crash and Hurricane, giving me the lead in turn 1. Serperior comes in, and I swap Pelipper out for Salamence to preserve the Focus Sash, as Blaziken goes for a double protect, but fails, and Basculegion knocks it out with a Wave Crash. Unfortunately for my opponent, Leaf Storm misses Basculegion, and I maintain a 4-2 advantage on turn 2. My opponent's final Pokemon is Incineroar, so I bring in Rillaboom to reset the stat drop and protect Salamence. Serperior finally lands a Leaf Storm, but +2 isn't enough against my current Pokemon. Serperior protects the Fake Out, and I set up Tailwind, while Incineroar parting shots Salamence. By this point, I pretty much have the game on lock, and as a combination of Dual Wing Beat and Bullet Seed take out Serperior, the stupid cat can't win a 1v4, and somehow I'm up 2-0 in Swiss. Winning this game felt good, and sure, I had a good matchup, I was still happy with how clean I played, which most importantly, gave me a huge confidence boost going into the next round. In round 3, I was going up against an Archaludon Mirror matchup, but my opponent was using a Trick Room variant with Dragonite, Sinistra, and Ursaluna. Knowing I likely have the higher speed, I lead with Rillaboom Archaludon, while my opponent starts with Archaludon Dragonite. My opponent's Dragonite is running an unorthodox set with Multiscale and Encore, something I was really afraid of, so I took a risk. I fake out Dragonite and land Draco Meteor, knocking it out on turn 1, as my opponent terras his Archaludon to do a little chip damage onto Archaludon. Sinistcha comes in, and I realize I have a big problem. Because I didn't bring Pelipper for some reason, all of my Pokemon are physical, and 2 of them only have multi-hit moves. I couldn't let my opponent's Archaludon get any stamina boosts, or else I would basically have no way to win the endgame. I swapped in Salamence and Flash Cannon into the Sinistcha, as Archaludon uses Electro Shot, possibly predicting a Pelipper switch in, as Sinistcha sets up the Trick Room. I protect Salamence against the Electro Shot and Matcha Gotcha, and Flash Cannon again into the Sinistcha, getting a special defense drop. I then bring in Basculegion to take the Dragon Pulse, as my opponent swaps in Ursaluna to get hit by the Flash Cannon. With no protect on both of my Pokemon, I can't stall in front of a burned Ursaluna, so I double switch into Salamence again to intimidate it and Terra Archaludon. My opponent predicts my Terra and doubles up into Archaludon with Facade and Dragon Pulse. But thanks to the attack drop, Archaludon is able to survive with a sliver of health and knock out Ursaluna with Body Press. With 1 turn of Trick Room left, I have to protect my Salamence and sack the Archaludon, in order to bring in Basculegion as the Trick Room ends, which in hindsight was the wrong move. What I believe is the correct play is to swap Archaludon for Rillaboom and hit Sinistcha with Dual Wing Beat. In this current game state, my Archaludon is my best win condition, as it's faster than my opponent and has the only special moves left on the team. To enable this, I have to deny Sinistcha's Trick Room, and there's 3 ways I can do this. The first would be for Salamence to land Dual Wing Beat, a 90% chance of happening, and if it misses, I have a second chance on the next turn because of Fake Out. If Salamence goes down however, then Basculegion could come in and knock it out with Last Respects. And with Basculegion and Archaludon, I had a good chance to win the 3v1. I still seem to be in good shape though by bringing Basculegion on the field as Trick Room ends, but disaster strikes as Salamence misses Dual Wing Beat, and although Basculegion prevents the Trick Room, Archaludon knocks out Basculegion, and I'm down to my 2 multi-hitters against a full HP Archaludon. I had one way to win the game. I needed a critical hit with Dual Wing Beat. I Fake Out to flinch Archaludon and Dual Wing Beat, but I don't get the crit, and Archaludon is at +3 defense. It all comes down to this final turn. Dual Wing Beat hits again, and then on the final hit, I land the crit. Archaludon takes out Salamence, but even after Grassy Terrain healing, 2 Bullet Seeds from Rillaboom finish it off. My opponent gracefully congratulates me as I'm undefeated going into round 4. I honestly had no idea how I won that game, and I basically set myself up to lose during team selection. Luck was on my side this time, but if I didn't lock in, I knew it was eventually going to cost me a game, which is exactly what happened in the next round. My next opponent is a pretty good player in the scene, and I'm up against a Trick Room Balance team that won the Sacramento Regionals. I lead Basculegion and Pelipper into Electabuzz and Ursaluna Blood Moon, which is definitely not the right lead. I protect Pelipper and try to flip turn out, but my opponent protects Blood Moon and tries to taunt my Pelipper. Now that I'm locked into flip turn, I lose all my momentum and go for a greedy play, attacking into the Blood Moon while also using okay, what the hell was going on here. Electabuzz uses Follow Me to soak up my attacks, and Hyper Voice brings both Pelipper and the incoming Rillaboom down to low health. Feeling I was really behind, I used Bullet Seed to take out the incoming Indeedee, but I missed the wide guard play, letting Electabuzz take out Pelipper and drop my speed. At this point, I don't know my opponent's final Pokemon. I think it's Sneasler, but I second guess myself. I bring in Basculegion, and I'm not sure if Last Respects can knock out the Electabuzz, when in reality, it was actually a roll in my favor. Electabuzz uses Follow Me, but I flip turn instead. High Horsepower finishes off Electabuzz, but Blood Moon knocks out the incoming Salamence. I bring back in Basculegion, but my opponent's last Pokemon was Sneasler, and as I target the wrong Pokemon again, Blood Moon deals the finishing blow, and I lose the first set of my day. Despite blundering on 4 of the possible 5 turns, this was still somehow a close game, and if I went for Last Respects on the Electabuzz, I actually had a pretty realistic chance of winning with my remaining Pokemon. But none of this matters, as round 5 pairings are up. My opponent has a really cool Halo Trick Room team. Almost their entire team are unique Pokemon, and for them to go 3-1 must mean it's a pretty effective team. My opponent leads with Chandelure and Hariyama, while I start with Archaludon and Rillaboom. I don't want Chandelure to set up Trick Room, So I go on the offense and double into it with Terrify High Horsepower and Draco Meteor. But of course, I missed a Draco. And my opponent knocks out my Assault Vest and sets up Trick Room. Even though Trick Room gets set up, I don't really need to switch out, as none of their Pokemon immediately threaten me. So even though Hariyama knocks off my loaded dice, and both my Pokemon eat a Heat Wave, I'm still able to take out Hariyama with Draco Meteor and Bullet Seed, giving me the lead. Abomasnow comes in to set up the snow, so I switch out Rillaboom for Pelipper, which tanks the Shadow Ball and Earth Power, while Archaludon chips away at Chandelure with a -1 Electro Shot. I protect with Pelipper to stall a turn of Trick Room, while my opponent swaps in Glaceon and correctly targets my Archaludon with Shadow Ball, but I'm able to knock out Chandelure with another Electro Shot. With my opponent's final 2 Pokemon on the field, I sack both Archaludon and Rillaboom to stall out the final turn of Trick Room and bring in Pelipper and Basculegion. After winning the Weather Wars, Basculegion and Pelipper comfortably win the 2v2, and my standings are 4-1. If I win the final round, I'm guaranteed to make Day 2. My final round opponent was running a balance team inspired by Michael Kelch's team in the Dance Regional, who, funnily enough, faced up against Federico Campanesi in the top 8. And in that game, Federico essentially won by bluffing Terra on Basculegion. However, since this was a best of 1, I didn't really want my entire set to be decided on one turn, and apparently so did my opponent. I led with Rillaboom and Salamence, while my opponent led with Dragapult and Sneasler. I called out his Fake Out on Rillaboom, and swapped in Archaludon to take the hit and get a defense boost, but my opponent surprised me by committing Terra Dragon Dragon Darts, and knocked out Salamence in one hit. I brought in Rillaboom, and with Fake Out pressure, Sneasler had to protect to preserve the Focus Sash, so I doubled into Dragapult, and caught King Gambit in the crossfire, knocking it out. Blood Moon comes in, and I make another prediction. I Terra Archaludon as Blood Moon protects, and Sneasler goes for a close combat into Archaludon, but High Horsepower and Body Press KOs it back. Dragapult comes back in, and this was a crucial turn. I for some reason think my opponent is gonna lock in Outrage and protect Blood Moon, which to be fair, sorta makes sense. Outrage might not knock out Archaludon, but it does knock out Rillaboom, and as long as Outrage lands on the correct target, my opponent could still be in contention to win. To compromise, I used Grassy Glide into Blood Moon for some chip, and Draco Meteor into the Dragapult, which was a major misplay. Instead, by not fully targeting the Blood Moon, I played right into my opponent's hand. And instead of Outrage, my opponent locks in Phantom Force, a risky play that leaves Blood Moon vulnerable. And due to my targeting, Draco Meteor misses Dragapult, and Blood Moon knocks out Archaludon. And with my final Pokemon being Basculegion, Phantom Force knocks it out in one hit, and since High Horsepower can't get enough damage onto Dragapult, I lose the game, finishing Day 1 with a 4-2 record. I was pretty disappointed with that game, as I felt I made all the right plays up to that final turn, but to be honest, 4-2 isn't that bad of a result. And I was still in contention for Day 2. Around half of the players with a 4-2 record would advance into the top cut. And turns out, I had pretty good resistance. Apparently, 4 of my 6 opponents made top cut, which kinda made sense due to my early lead, and I made Day 2 as the 3rd highest ranked 4-2 player and overall 11th seed. The next day, I arrived at the venue at 9 AM in the morning, and this time there were a lot less people here. With only 16 players left, every round from this point onward would be single elimination best of 3s. There was no more room for error. As I take a look at the brackets to prepare myself, I see a familiar name, as my round of 16 opponent is Ma Chunyang, the reigning 2024 Hong Kong Nationals champion, and he's running the exact same Sacramento team that my round 4 opponent also used. Luckily, I was reviewing my games yesterday and prepared for this exact matchup, so I had a new plan to deal with the Electabuzz. So after thinking about it, I dropped Basculegion for Grimmsnarl. Light Screen gives me a better matchup against Blood Moon and Indeedee, and Spirit Break threatens damage onto Electabuzz and also discourages them from using Terra. As we sat down and started the timer for 60 minutes, there was a little intermission. For some reason, both our switches just didn't want to connect with each other, and we disconnected a few times on the first turn. Once we found the judge to settle the issue for us, the minute timer was already down by 5 minutes, which meant that if all of our games went down to the wire, it was quite possible that time would run out and lead to a tiebreaker. In Game 1, I led with Pelipper and Grimmsnarl, while my opponent leads with Electabuzz and Blood Moon. I play conservatively to scout my opponent and protect Pelipper and set up the light screen, as my opponent goes for Electro Web and Blood Moon into Grimmsnarl. With just Hyper Voice and Electro Web as attack options, I think my opponent will taunt Pelipper, so I make a play. Blood Moon stays in and protects, and Prankster Grimmsnarl taunts Electabuzz and disables it, as Weather Ball goes into the Blood Moon to cover for Indeedee switch. With Blood Moon vulnerable, my opponent switches in Indeedee, and Electabuzz uses Electro Web to break my sash, but a double into the Electabuzz brings it down to yellow health. Despite being taunted, my opponent still doesn't switch out Electabuzz, and brings in Sneasler to activate Psychic Seed. Pelipper goes down to Electro Web, and Spirit Break lands on Sneasler, but with Pelipper gone, the tide swings in my opponent's favor. That's why when I bring in Rillaboom, I need to make a play. My opponent switches out into Indeedee to get terrain back up as I switch into Archaludon. Rillaboom eats a Dire Claw, but is able to use Side Bullet Seed to set up Archaludon to +4 defense. I sack Grimmsnarl on the next turn, and Terra Bug Body Press takes out the incoming Blood Moon. Electabuzz comes back in, and because Indeedee is in the back, I can't risk Grassy Glide. So Electabuzz uses Follow Me to direct the Body Press, and Dire Claw takes out Rillaboom. Terra Bug Archaludon can't handle Sneasler and Indeedee with Focus Sash, and I lose Game 1. Looking back, I think my game plan was correct. However, I allowed my opponent to outposition me due to a lack of offensive pressure. If I had used Bullet Seed to knock out Indeedee instead of boosting Archaludon, I think I was in the driver's seat. In Game 2, we bring the exact same leads, but my opponent decides to use Electro Web and Blood Moon into Pelipper, knocking it out, while I only manage to set up the light screen. But that's fine by me, as Rillaboom comes in for free. Electro Web and Hyper Voice deal more chip damage, but Bullet Seed and Spirit Break get a crucial KO on Electabuzz, making it 3-3. Indeedee comes in, and I make another bold play. Instead of switching out Rillaboom to reset the terrain, I switch out Grimmsnarl and bring in Archaludon. Expanding Force in Blood Moon deals a chunk of its health, but Rillaboom lands a Bullet Seed into Indeedee and gets a one-hit KO. Sneasler comes in, and by sacrificing Grimmsnarl, I can Terra Archaludon and knock out Blood Moon. With Fake Out support, Archaludon finishes off Sneasler, tying up the series 1-1. I was one game away from beating the local champion, which is why I felt I had to switch things up for Game 3. I decided to lead Rillaboom for Game 3 instead, as my opponent brings the same leads. With Fake Out pressure, my opponent switches in Indeedee, but that was all part of my master plan. Grimmsnarl sets up Light Screen, and Rillaboom uses Bullet Seed to knock out Indeedee, landing me the Pokemon advantage for about 5 seconds, because there was one flaw in my plan. Terra Normal Blood Moon. I was sort of hoping my opponent would miss this, as most Blood Moons only have a low chance to knock out Assault Vest Rillabooms in one hit, but since I was loaded dice, this was actually a roll in their favor. My opponent brings in Sneasler to activate Psychic Seed, as I bring in Pelipper, and we both protect. Blood Moon lands Hyper Voice into Grimmsnarl as I Spirit Break into the Protect. Electabuzz swaps in for Blood Moon, and Sneasler uses Dire Claw to break Pelipper's sash, but Electabuzz gets chunked by Weather Ball and Spirit Break. I stall another turn with Protect and knock out the Electabuzz, and Blood Moon comes back in. I bring in Archaludon as Sneasler knocks out Pelipper, and Blood Moon lands Hyper Voice on Archaludon. Psychic Terrain ends, and it's Grimmsnarl and Archaludon versus Blood Moon and Sneasler. Blood Moon is the main target, and as long as I take it out, Sneasler would be manageable. I Terra Bug and lock in Electroshock, the strongest move that can't miss. Sneasler close combats for little chip damage, as Electroshock charges into Blood Moon. My heart is pumping as the HP goes down and down, but it lives. And Ursaluna launches a Blood Moon into Archaludon, knocking it out. Life Orb knocks itself out, but with just Grimmsnarl left on the field against Sneasler, I have to pray to Thunder Wave. And not only do I have to hit it, I also need Sneasler to stay paralyzed for 2 turns, a mere 5% chance to happen. I lock in my move, and Thunder Wave hits, but Sneasler moves straight away and seals the set for my opponent. And with that, I'm officially eliminated from the Hong Kong Premier Ball League, and end with a final ranking of 14th. So what's the takeaway here? The most obvious that doesn't need to be said is that I have much more to learn. I'll be honest, I wasn't really as prepared as I hoped to be. The team I was using wasn't polished at all, and I should have done a lot more in figuring out the matchups. But despite losing in the end, I'm happy with what I achieved in my first ever event. From blundering in turn 1, to scraping game wins, to going toe to toe with the local champion, I felt I was improving game by game, and sure, I still made a glaring amount of mistakes, but this is the inevitable process of improving. And if you're wondering why I made this video, I want to learn from this experience. I think I'm almost 100 hours in working on this video, and between writing the script, recording the footage, and editing the actual thing, I've probably rewatched every round dozens of times, and I felt that I've learned a lot more not only about VGC, but a lot more about myself as a player during the process. I'm hoping to put this video out there so I can hear a lot more from the community, to see what I did right, to see what I did wrong, anything really. This is my first time making VGC content, and I really want to make more, so I'd love to hear some constructive criticism to help me improve in the future. In Chinese, we have a proverb, failure is the mother of success. And while I don't think the Premier Ball League was a failure for me or anything, I'm hoping this tournament would lead me to success in the future. See you on May 31st.